The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and don't necessarily reflect the views of WOWT.
One of the questions that you hear all the time, people say, well, I'm for immigration, but I want them to come in here legally. How does that happen? How do they get in here legally? I'll answer those questions. I want to answer those questions. I'll find out the answers in just a moment or two. But first, I want to thank you for joining us on this podcast. I want to welcome you and also invite you to like us on Facebook, the Beck is Talking Facebook page, and also the Beck is Talking YouTube channel, and Spotify. We're on iHeart, all the audio channels too, audio platforms. Spread the word, tell your friends, and it's all brought to you by Havana Garage in the Old Market. You know, Havana Garage is just a fun place, a great place to go and have a cigar, have a cocktail or two, and solve the problems of the world. Talk to your friends. There's a beautiful outdoor patio, and the weather's nice like this. Outdoor patio, they've got live entertainment from time to time, and an atmosphere there reminiscent of the old days of Sinatra and the Rat Pack. Check it out, okay? In the Old Market, Havana Garage. So, immigration is one of the main stories right now. I guess it's always been a story, but it's really taken on a whole new level here under this administration. And joining me right now is Astrid Munn. Astrid is with the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement, and she is the lead attorney for the center. And appreciate you being here because there's just a lot of questions. I mean, in my career with talk radio and that, I've had people all the time say, well, I'm all for immigration, but I want them to get in here legally. So tell me, how does somebody get into this country legally?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show. And I think that's a completely legitimate sentiment. But I think the people expressing that sentiment often have no understanding of how complex our federal immigration system is. Yes, there are the legal channels that we often think of, that we learn about through television and movies often, are employment-based pathways to legal status. That's saying a job or a school wants you here and puts papers so that you can come in here with a visa. Or there are family-based pathways, which is when a spouse or a parent or a child files papers for a close relative for them to come in. And that, depending on what country they're from, can be a process that lasts from months to years. And so those are employment-based and family-based. I would say those are the happier ways to get into the country. And at the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement, where I work, and I should mention, I'm one of many lead attorneys. I specialize.
Well, then tell your website that, because when I went to the website, it said you were the lead attorney.
Okay. Well, what we specialize in is humanitarian relief. My team, we specialize in representing victims of violent crime and severe forms of trafficking who have cooperated with law enforcement, including ICE and Homeland Security investigations, to prosecute and investigate violent crimes and trafficking. We also have teams within our legal department that specialize in representing children who got here by themselves, fleeing abuse, abandonment, and neglect on the part of their parents in their home country. We also have a lot of attorneys dedicated to asylum, which is when people, they are in so much danger, they're facing so much persecution in their home country that they can't come in through those happy employment and family-based pathways. Once they get themselves in here, they have 1 year to basically contact the federal government and say, hey, I was in danger, please protect me.
Okay, now asylum, I've been told, or at least some will say, that that's sort of like just a ruse, that they'll say that they're here for asylum to stay in the country, and once they're granted asylum, they are here legally, and they have to wait for a court date, and that court date could be years, could it not?
It can be, yes. Our immigration court system is very, very backlogged. I think during the Obama administration, there may have been only, 400,000 cases, but that number has since crept up to, 1 million-ish. So it's very, very backlogged. A lot of my clients, their first court dates aren't until 2027 or 2028. So yes, it may take years. And in terms of, is it all a ruse? Here in Omaha, we see a lot of people fleeing gang-based persecution in their home countries, namely Guatemala, Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras. And those cases, although the folks are saying that I was targeted, I was extorted because I lived in a particular neighborhood, et cetera. Those are weaker cases, and they often don't prevail in our court. I should also mention that our particular court, the Omaha Immigration Court, has one of the lowest win rates. I think it's only in like the 2 or 3% win rates for asylum, but it also has to do with what kind of cases are flocking to our area.
What do you mean? So do they separate things? In other words, if I'm an immigration judge in Georgia, will I deal with different cases than an immigration judge in Nebraska?
Well, for example, I think in Miami, you're probably going to get a lot of Cubans bringing asylum claims based on I was persecuted because I didn't support the communist parties, and because I was politically apathetic, I got the crap beat out of me. You're going to see it just has to do with what nationalities are drawn to different parts of our country. Nebraska happens to be welcoming a lot of folks from the Northern Triangle, like Guatemala, Mexico, El Salvador. And so what people bring with them when people are like, I need to come to Nebraska because that's where my sister is, that's where my uncle is. I don't know that people were planning ahead, like destination Nebraska. It's just where they have some connections and some community. And when they are fleeing persecution, what they are often bringing with them are these stories of gang-based persecution, or sometimes fleeing severe forms of domestic violence. And unfortunately, our immigration laws and our asylum analysis as it currently works doesn't look too kindly on those cases. It's just not meant for those types of persecution always.
Okay, so you say that somebody claims asylum, they're given a court date. They're given a court date, which could be years down the road, as you mentioned, backlogged immensely. You've got 100 clients, all claiming asylum. Of those 100 clients, how many will show up for their court date? And how many will just sort of like either self-deport or just hide under the radar?
Well, if I'm their attorney, I'm definitely going to do everything within my abilities to make sure that they attend their court date, because failure to attend a court date can have very serious consequences. I mean, if you miss a court date in state court, you might get a bench warrant for failing to appear. And then, the next time you get pulled over, you could find yourself arrested for the bench warrant. But if you fail to attend your court hearing in immigration court, they basically have the hearing as though you were there, and then you are ordered removed in absentia. So they are basically ordering you. I think the more popular term is deported. You get deported for not showing up.
Right. Okay. So there's definitely a motivation and a benefit to them showing up to court, even if they don't win their case. At least they have a chance in court. Whereas if they don't show up, they get caught. They're gone.
Yes, and that brings me to like a really important point, that immigration law is incredibly complicated, and these cases take a very long time. And providing enough evidence to prevail on your case is no easy feat, which is why it's so important to have an immigration attorney. Having an immigration attorney makes it 5 times more likely for a case to succeed. In Nebraska, though, only 40% of the people who need immigration attorneys actually have them.
Is that because they can't afford them? Is that because they're not aware of them? Why do only 40% have an attorney?
A lot of it has to do with cost. The average retainer can be anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000, and that's just to start. And a lot of people who are here from other countries often are at 200% or below of the federal poverty level, and they don't have that kind of cash lying around. So cost certainly is one factor, and then simply knowledge and access, because not a lot of people know that there are some free or low-cost opportunities for legal representation.
If they don't have that kind of cash laying around, they're lousy criminals and lousy drug dealers, right? It's really, because that's the whole argument, right? We're getting rid of the bad guys. But we had a situation here in Omaha recently where they went into a meat packing plant, I guess, right? And arrested what? How many? 74, you said?
It's our understanding that 74 people were detained yesterday.
Okay, 74 detained. And is it also your understanding that you're not entirely sure where they are?
It's our understanding that they were taken to the Department of Homeland Security's offices at 1717 Avenue H here in Omaha.
So if somebody is here without the documentation, if somebody is here and they get caught and they get arrested, do they have the right to an attorney? Do they have the right to make a phone call? Can they contact their family? Can they post bail? What is the policy here?
Yeah, and I just want to first address that. It's our understanding that a lot of the folks that were detained yesterday as part of that enforcement action, a lot of them did have documentation and did have permission to be living and working here. And but in terms of their rights, yes, our immigration laws do provide that people have a right to counsel. It's not going to be at the expense of the government, but they certainly, like in a criminal proceeding, because most of this is a civil legal structure. So people certainly do have the right to counsel. And for the most part, people have some due process right and have the right to their day in court. Often that day in court isn't for quite a few years. And however, because of some executive orders that were issued in January, some people who have been here fewer than 2 years might be subject to expedited removal, where if they have been here fewer than 2 years, they could be shuttled out of here without a day in court unless they express a fear of returning to their home country.
Real quick, I just want to mention the fact that although you talked about what happened yesterday, this is a podcast, so it's be listened at any time. So we're talking about something that happened in the recent past here in Omaha, but similar things are happening all over the country.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Then you mentioned, I forgot what else I want to say for a second. Okay, so you mentioned that they're here for less than 2 years, that they could go be deported right away. Yes. But also, as I read the story, and what ICE has supposedly said, is that the packing plant that these people were taken from, that they did E-Verify, that they passed. Everybody, as far as the owner and the management of that place knew, all of those workers were there legally. Is this a case of stolen identity? Is this a case of the ICE messing up and taking somebody that is supposed to be here legally? I know you can't speak about this specifically, but generally speaking, what happens in a case like this?
I mean, generally when there are concerns about identity theft, those are often undertaken. Well, those are generally governed by our state criminal laws. I've had clients who have been investigated because, yes, in their past, they did use a social security number that belonged to a U.S. citizen, and they know that they should not have used that. And sure enough, investigators were looking for them, and there were criminal consequences for those individuals. But that's our state criminal law system at work. That's the rule of law at its best. And but if that was truly the intent of ICE yesterday, I don't know that it required sweeping mass immigration enforcement with masks and everything. I am not one to badmouth ICE. I feel like at their best, they are helping uncover trafficking rings and helping protect victims. But unfortunately, what yesterday did caused a lot of disruption and terrorized the immigrant population.
So when they went in, they didn't go in with a criminal warrant. They went in with a civil warrant. Can you explain the difference between the two? Because I think I agree with you. I agree. Look, if these people are really criminals, then fine, lock them up or deport them, do it to the full extent of the law. I thoroughly agree. But if this is just somebody over here who's trying to make a better life for their family, if they're just trying to make it so that their child doesn't have to, work in the fields the way that they had to, if they're just trying to do that, that to me is the American dream. So explain the difference between a criminal warrant and a civil warrant.
Well, I don't know. With respect to warrants, as I understand them, I mean, basically, they're all kind of criminal in that they're trying to arrest someone or they're trying to search an area. And how I try to explain it to my clients is that there are judicial warrants that are issued by a judge and signed by a judge and have a certain shelf life. And those you kind of have to listen to and honor because they're based on probable cause generally. ICE, though, they have the ability to whip up their own warrants for arrest. So then there's also ICE warrants for arrest that the ICE officers themselves write up, and that's a completely different animal.
Wait a minute. So we don't know if that's the case in this particular instance here, do we?
I do not know.
But you're telling me that ICE officers themselves, if some ICE officers walking down the street and he sees somebody that looks Hispanic or looks foreign, looks that they don't, they're not a white Anglo-Saxon, they could go and just make up their own arrest warrant and detain them and check them out?
I haven't heard of that happening. But
could they?
In
theory?
In theory, possibly, yes.
That's speaking for myself here. That is a scary situation. Tell me about the people that come to your operation. Talk to me about the people that come to the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement. Who are they? What are they like? What's their background?
Oh, well, I can't speak for the entire organization. I mainly have knowledge about the legal department. Last year alone, we served 2,300 individuals in our legal department. Each one had at least one case with us, which can last from months to years, but we stay with people to the finish line. And right now on my caseload, the majority of my clients come from Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Mexico. But we're seeing more people because of recent parole programs. We're seeing people coming in from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Ukraine. Now,
just in general, I know that if I meet somebody, I get a vibe off them. Is this a good person, somebody I'm going to enjoy hanging out with? Is this person makes me feel uncomfortable? Is this a person that I think is, maybe not all there mentally or could be a bad dude? And again, I'm asking for gross generalization here. But given the scenario, when you meet these people, what's the impression you get? And I know it's a very broad-based question, but I'm just trying to see, because so much has been put into both corners here. Either they're all Boy Scouts here trying to raise their family, or they're all, drug dealers trying to kill your children. And I'm just trying to figure out, what the reality is.
The reality is that, in my experience, there are people who came here just to work and were just hoping to earn some money to send back home and then possibly go back. That exists. But there are also individuals who are fleeing dictatorships and anarchy, people from Venezuela, from Nicaragua, from Haiti. I mean, it's basically chaos in those countries, people who are escaping communist regimes from Cuba. I mean, there are people who, I listened to a couple of your episodes, and you care about like our social ills affecting Omaha. But as troubled as we are and as much work as we have to go, America is still pretty great. And so a lot of people flock here for the protections afforded us and for the freedoms afforded us, the freedom of speech, etc. And so when people get to me, by the time you reach me, you have worked really hard to get here. Not only were you likely apprehended at the U.S. border and had to explain yourself to border officials such that you were able to get a court date and come on through and up to Nebraska, but then you also had to contact our hotline, keep up with our wait list, and just stick with it and show up for the appointment. And so once somebody is in front of me in my desk, it shows a lot of tenacity and a great desire to be here and to have their day in court.
I'm speaking out purely for myself here on this, but it seems to me that so many of these people that come into the country, whether it be legally or illegally, come into this country, they still believe in the American dream, when a lot of Americans have given up on it. And it frustrates me. And I understand there's no easy answer. We all want an easy answer, right? We either want to build a wall or let them all in. We want an easy answer, and there is no real easy answer to this. But it frustrates me that I don't think even like the politicians, want to try to fix the problem because they can use it so much as a wedge issue to raise money, to get elected, to stoke fear in the people. And it doesn't seem to me like that's a smart way to be doing business. And again, I'm speaking purely for myself. I'm not speaking, I'm not trying to put, words in your mouth or anything, because I know you've got, like you said, you have to work with these people. You work with ICE, you work with the judges, you work with the immigration system. Let's talk about the difference now between an immigrant and a refugee.
Sure.
Okay? Refugee comes here, they're not claiming asylum because they're fleeing necessarily because they're fleeing a dangerous country, right? They're coming here in some cases because, well, they are fleeing a dangerous country, but they're coming here in some cases because they've actually helped American soldiers overseas, and they've actually provided a service for America, and they come over here to start a better life for themselves, right? I mean, there is a big distinction between a refugee and an immigrant, correct?
Well, there's a difference between I would distill that further. There's a difference between an immigrant, a refugee, and an asylee. So, and I would say that all refugees are immigrants, but not all immigrants are refugees. Refugees are folks who, even from outside the United States, they were already vetted, and it was already determined by our immigration system that yes, you have reason to fear being in your home country on account of you might be persecuted on account of your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, your membership in a particular social group. Something about you can't change or shouldn't be expected to change. And so they've already been vetted to be in that condition and that they are safe to bring into the United States. And as a refugee, they come in here legally, and within a year, they can become a permanent resident.
Go back into the YouTube channel, the Becca's Talking YouTube channel, and look at past. Oh, my microphone here, and look at past episodes. I interviewed a man by the name of Feroz Mohammed, and Feroz was an Afghan refugee who is now, I believe, an American citizen. All here legal, trying to bring his family who worked in support of the American troops in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And they were going through the whole process of getting them into the country. They'd been vetted and everything. And then Donald Trump went and just slammed the door and said, no more refugees, leaving his family member who, like I said, worked with America in the war against terror and now stranded over their own life in danger in Afghanistan, or maybe they've escaped to Pakistan, but not able to come into this country. And it just seems to me there's got to be more of a common sense way to handle something like that.
Well, I mean, we have more than just the executive branch, Tom. We have the judiciary, which sometimes is blocking certain actions by our president, but also, and just as importantly, we have the legislative branch. And Congress really is the most porous and accessible part of our government. We elected them to represent us and to work for us to make sure that we get federal services and benefits. And part of that is benefits through U.S. citizenship and immigration services. So if people are dissatisfied with how things in immigration are working, now more than ever is the time to contact their elected representatives, their in the House and the Senate, and in my experience, they have been working really hard and can be quite effective at it.
I know that Don Bacon has worked very closely with refugees and that, and he also supports a pathway to citizenship. I know pathway to citizenship, or at least legal ability for the DACA children who are now adults to be able to live and work here in peace. So I know that Don Bacon has been receptive to that, but he's been blocked by the leadership in Congress. When you have the Senate in the last administration came up with a bipartisan bill to at least ease the problem. I don't know if you're ever going to totally solve it, but to at least ease the problem, they wouldn't even hear it in the House because it was a wedge issue they could use for the election. And as an American citizen, that frustrates me. And again, I'm speaking for myself here because I'm trying to learn, but I'm also trying to, just realize, because I'm very... My great-grandparents came over to this country. My parents were raised, both my mom and my dad were raised in a Czechoslovakian neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. So as a young kid growing up, I remember going over to Grandma and Grandpa's house, and they spoke Czech, and they had the pork and dumplings, and I was, exposed to the, to the Czech culture, even though my parents, Dad was a World War II vet, I'm a baby boomer, and, so I was removed from that, but at least as a young child, I was exposed to it. And so I have a deep admiration for, people that come over to this country for a better life. And it frustrates me when you've got a bipartisan solution on one side of the House, and then, the Congress says, no, we can't do it because, Donald Trump wants to use it as a campaign issue. We need to be working together to solve problems. And nobody's going to be 100% satisfied with everything, but, geez. And I forget the statistic, but I think it was something like, and I'll get on my soapbox in a second here, but like 85% or something of the American people believe that DACA recipients should be able to live and work in peace without fear of being deported. If 85% of America don't agree on anything, and they agree on that, and yet Congress won't do anything about it.
And that's funny because DACA came about through an executive order, and executive orders are essentially like Band-Aids that the presidents use when Congress can't come together on an issue. And so if anything is ripe for bipartisan congressional progress, it would be codifying DACA and making it so that DACA doesn't just exist as an executive order, but as some part of our Immigration and Naturalization Act, something set in stone, an actual benefit that isn't just going to change, the whim of another order.
What made you decide you wanted to focus on this part of law?
Oh, gosh. Well, I feel like I just kind of fell into it as the path of least resistance. So in law school, I think I was very interested after living in Nebraska and going to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I did a lot of my journalism focusing on the interaction between tribal law, federal law, state law, and just how their gaps occur with these different jurisdictions. Things can be very piecemeal and people get hurt along the way. And so in law school, I was very interested in federal Indian law and tribal matters. I even clerked on the Cheyenne River Indian Sioux tribe, which is, kind of an international issue because they're kind of a micronation. But once I got to D.C., Washington, D.C., it was really hard for me to break into Indian law because I didn't belong to a federally recognized tribe, and that's fine. But I did speak Spanish, and I am the daughter of a Guatemalan immigrant, and I did take immigration law. So there was huge demand in D.C., and I think throughout all of the United States for Spanish-speaking lawyers who know immigration. So that's how it came about.
You don't have to answer this, okay?
Okay.
You say the daughter of a Guatemalan immigrant.
Yes, she's a U.S. citizen now.
Now, did she come in legally?
Yes, my father was he was a white guy from the Sandhills, and he was a Peace Corps volunteer, first in Ghana, then in Guatemala. That's where he met my mom at a Christmas party at the U.S. Embassy, actually. And there was a civil war at the time, and eventually my father got sick of living in conditions where, there was no freedom of the press, there was no freedom of speech in Guatemala. And so he had been married to my mother for 6 years by then, so he brought her to the safest place he knew, Norfolk, Nebraska.
That is, again, a great, true American story. That is, and that's it. Daughter of an immigrant who is now, a successful attorney. That's what this country was founded on. Going back to my great-grandparents, my grandfather, their son, became a city councilman in Cleveland, Ohio. All of my grandfather's sons, my dad included, all became successful in their own way. And because of that, I've been able to, have a pretty decent career doing something that I love, and I'm not cleaning toilets, for minimum wage in a country where I don't speak the language. I can only imagine what it must be like to have to go to a place where you don't speak the language, you don't know, and you're doing just really lousy jobs for lousy pay and treated poorly, but it's better than where you came from.
Oh, yeah. I have clients that have stories like that. I have clients who do have they went to preparatory school in their home countries, or they have some college education. Maybe they worked in a bank or for like a transnational corporation in their home country. But I mean, every time their husband beat them, the police and the judges weren't listening. And so they're here scrubbing toilets, but at least they're safe.
I mean, a few more questions, but one more time I want to mention the fine folks at Havana Garage in the Old Market. Havana Garage, where you can go and feel safe and have a nice time, especially, when the weather is nice. They've got an outdoor patio. They have live music from time to time. And, of course, just the atmosphere. A great selection of whiskeys and drinks and beers. And then also, of course, a nice humidor where you can have a cigar and just sort of relax and enjoy the fruits of your labor. So if you're hanging out in the Old Market, make sure you make Havana Garage a part of your downtown experience. So I know that you don't have a crystal ball in front of you, but I also know that you talk to other lawyers in similar situations and people that are dealing with this issue. What do you see the future being? I mean, is there any way of even guessing, or things just change so rapidly day to day that there's no way of knowing where things are going to go with immigration law and refugee law?
Well, I think for the foreseeable future, we're just experiencing death by 1,000 cuts. I feel like a lot of things that we took for granted in terms of ease of access within the immigration system for us attorneys is now being taken away from us. Case in point, sometimes cases take too long to process. And so if we contact immigration and we don't hear anything from them, we used to be able to contact an ombudsman, like a neutral party, to kind of investigate and push things along. But that office has since been shuttered. So we can no longer turn to this ombudsman to investigate and advocate and see what's going on. And now we're relying more and more on our elected officials to do congressional liaison type work and basically twist immigration's arm to do what we need. And I feel like what I see happening, I just feel like this is an opportunity for renewed civic engagement. I hope that what's going on now stirs people to not just write to their elected officials, but start attending city council and county commissioner meetings and start paying attention to what's going on around them civically. Because if they don't, I mean, democracy will crumble, and our immigration system is just one part of that.
This is anecdotal, but I read a story about supposedly where people in a very red community had a guy, the person that owned a restaurant, ran a restaurant, but was here illegally. And when they deported him, the people in the town were saying, wait a minute, we thought you were only going to get the bad guys, and that's it. Because no doubt, if they're a bad person, then yes, please lock them up, throw away the key. I had no problem with that. But if they're a good person, just trying to make a better life for themselves. And it's a complex issue. No doubt about it. And you're not going to be perfect on it in every case. No doubt about it. But at least I would hope that we'd be able to try more. Try to handle this in a more mature, responsible, educated level than what it appears to be what's going on right now. Because what appears to be going on right now, I don't see it as being the America that I was raised to believe in. And on that note, do you have any last words that you want to say? Anything you want people to know about the immigration refugee system that we didn't cover?
Well, I'd like to say a little bit about that anecdote you had.
Okay.
I mean, this gentleman that had been working here for years, so I guess it would be accurate to say that he was undocumented. He came in here without permission. So he certainly broke a law. He broke the civil immigration laws of you need to come in with permission. And I mean, if he had been here for years, I feel like this is also an opportunity. I mean, not to hold up a crystal ball, but certainly a mirror to the red states and to the people who feel red. I mean, during George W. Bush, I was still maybe in 8th grade at the time, but I mean, that was the time of compassionate conservatism. And there was a certain admission that, okay, well, no one else stateside is willing to do this work, to scrub the toilets, to slit the pigs' throats, etc., in our processing plants. So we may as well allow people to be here, albeit without permission. And so, I mean, the America and the landscape that is developed as a result, I mean, that as a result of red policies, so to speak, and to kind of just turn our back on all those people and the legacies that they've built here in the United States seems a bit hypocritical at this point.
And John, say, gee, thanks for rubbing in the fact that you were in 8th grade during the George W. Bush administration. Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. I'm so old. Astrid, thank you very much. This has been very interesting and very informative, and hopefully it gets people to take a look at this very complex issue in a new way, or at least give it a little bit more thought. You know, that's it. I mean, we're never going to agree on everything when it comes to this. There's always going to be some prejudice, no matter what. There's always going to be that. But at the same time, you know, this country was founded to form a more perfect union. So let's keep working towards trying to make it a more perfect union where the words on the Statue of Liberty can still hold true. And on that note, thank you for joining us. As I said, please like the Becca's Talking Facebook page. Also, subscribe there on the YouTube channel. And, of course, visit the Banner Garage in the Old Market. Until next time, thank you, and take care, and bye, y'all.